There's a general pattern here, a Trump way of war, we could call it. One thing that's central to all of his action is they're geostrategic, pressuring the Panamanians to divorce themselves from China, making sure the Venezuelan oil does not go to Russia or China by changing the government and capturing Maduro. Things like that suggest that the current Iranian operation has targeted China. It's a major supplier of Chinese oil. China is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, supplier of consumer goods, material goods to Iran. It supplies weaponry to Iran, and Iran has become a client more of China now than Russia, and it may be lost to China. We've seen Donald Trump's punitive action, preemptive actions in his first term and now in his second as well. And there's a general pattern here, a Trump way of war, we could call it. One thing that's central to all of his action is they're geostrategic, pressuring the Panamanians to divorce themselves from China, making sure the Venezuelan oil does not go to Russia or China by changing the government and capturing Maduro. Things like that suggest that the current Iranian operation has targeted China. It's a major supplier of Chinese oil. China is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, supplier of consumer goods, material goods to Iran. It supplies weaponry to Iran, and Iran has become a client more of China now than Russia, and it may be lost to China, as Venezuela was and maybe Panama was. You're starting to see a pattern. These are wars of reckoning. So there's always, people say, well, why are we attacking Iran? In Trump's way of reasoning, he's settling up old scores. Panama was getting away with murder through a previous administration, maybe including his own, by stationing or allowing the Chinese to have strategic locations on the Panama Canal. It was time to say no more. Maduro was getting away with literally murder, sending drugs, working with the cartels into the United States, sending hardened criminals into the United States as well, illegal aliens, and it was time to say, you're not going to cause a Castroite Latin American communist revolution. We're going to stop it. And it was past time, in Trump's way of thinking. All of these wars are in that way. Same thing with Iran. They have killed more Americans, as we all have been told, than any other terrorist clique or operation, going back even before the Iran-Iraq war, before our incursions in the Gulf War. At the very beginning, that government was birthed on the idea of taking American hostages and then subsequently blowing up our embassy, blowing up Marine barracks, involvement in Khobar Towers, using proxies like Hezbollah to hijack planes, assassinate America. It was time, in other words, to even up the score. These take place during negotiations. Notice that Trump was negotiating with the Iranians during the summer hit on their nuclear facilities. He was negotiating with them in this current war. He was negotiating with the Venezuelans, and that is his characteristic. He's saying to these different entities, I want a peaceful solution. And even if he didn't want a peaceful solution, the idea that he is negotiating lessens the criticism that they're preemptive or preventative optional wars. In other words, he can say, well, I wanted to make peace, but the negotiations broke down. Notice they're top-down attacks. They go after Soleimani in the first term, or Baghdadi, or they go after Maduro, or they go after Khamenei. The idea is everybody in the world should be on notice that the people themselves are not culpable. They are shanghaied, coerced by these terrible leaders, and Donald Trump, will get rid of the leaders and start with the top rather than the bottom or the people. And that's a very successful strategy. Of course, there's no nation building. Donald Trump ran against the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. The MAGA base says we don't want forever optional wars, especially the Middle East. So there is no pretense that there's going to be a gender studies program on Iran, or there's going to be George Floyd murals, or there's going to be a pride flag over the U.S. embassy in Iran. There's no cultural imperialism, no desire to say we were going to make democracies all over the Middle East. We're not going to do that. And we're not going to have boots on the ground. We're not going to have ground troops unless emergencies. There's a weird exit strategy, too, that Donald Trump has in all of these. He determines when the war starts and when it ends. I don't know if he's going to be successful in all these cases, but he takes out the Iranian nuclear facilities, and everybody says we're going to be in an endless tit-for-tat struggle now in the summer of 2025. And what happens? He allows Iran a performative art hit on American base in Qatar, and then he says, I want to make Iran great again. And that's the end of it. After this death of Soleimani, the same thing. Already, prematurely perhaps, he's already talking about negotiations with Iran. And what that does is it sort of dampens the criticism of him. Just as he went to war in the midst of negotiations, he doesn't say, well, negotiations will not work. Maybe they will, and we can end this, but the war will start and end when he sees as favorable terms to the United States. There's no effort. An eighth aspect of the Trump way of war, there's no effort to go to the United Nations. No United Nations, no International Criminal Court, no EU consultation. NATO, we consult with them in matters European, but nobody talked about NATO. The idea is that there's very little trust that these platforms that are multilateral have the wherewithal or the ability or the desire to take prompt, decisive action. And they will only clog up the process if you consult them and you hinge your decision-making on a foreign entity. 9, there's showcases for U.S. arms. Have you noticed that? Everybody's talking about the greatest, biggest, strongest warship in the history of civilization, the Gerald Ford, new Ford-class carrier, 105,000 tons of displacement, $13 billion, maybe 4,500 manned warship. Very impressive. We're talking about our new kamikaze one-way drones that we haven't seen before. People, if you've seen the maps that the Pentagon has released that have been replicated by the news outlets, they show Iran in the middle, and then the 4 sea. There's American assets all the way in the Indian Ocean. They're in the Red Sea. They're in the Mediterranean Sea. They're in the Gulf of Oman. They're in the Straits of Hormuz. They're in the Persian Gulf. And they're all fixated on Iran. It's surrounded. And they want that to be known that only the United States has this type of weaponry and this reach and these resources. And finally, there's no, I don't know how to put it, but he's not hiding U.S. self-interest. Of course, he talks about it'll be much better for the greater Middle East, but we wouldn't have gone to war if it hadn't been for U.S. interests. And what is U.S. interest? We're sick and tired of the Iranians attacking our allies, but more importantly, as the biggest killer of Americans. We don't want them to hijack planes anymore. We don't want them to stage assassination attempts in New York or in Washington against either dissidents or foreign entities like the Saudi ambassador. We don't like them to capture hostages and torture them. We don't like them sending lethal arms to kill Americans as they did during the Iraq War. We don't want them to kidnap people in foreign countries or in Iran and hold them as we're just sick of it. And it's in our interest in Trump's way of war to end it. Will all of this work? I don't know. It's very hard to say I'm going to decide when a war starts and I'm going to decide when a war ends, and we're not going to have ground troops and we're going to go across the world and settle scores. And yet, as we've seen before, the Trump way of war worked to get Soleimani, General Soleimani, the architect of the Iranian terror state, Mr. al-Baghdadi, who was taken out, and ISIS was bombed proverbially into rubble. A clear end, a clear beginning, a clear end. The Wagner Group, what we were going to do with them. This was a Russian entity. We killed more of them than any moment in the Cold War. I think 200 Russians were killed by Americans. And it followed the same script that I just outlined. We saw the same script during the first Iranian incursion in summer, and now we're seeing it again. It's a very strange idea. War doesn't change because human nature is immutable. So we know the rules of war, but the actual practice of it, that is, not the struggle between humans and political entities to use the force of arms to persuade someone of your own political, cultural, religious, material agenda. That's immutable. But how you do it, what are the tactics, what are the strategy, what are the weaponry, have changed, and no one has changed them more than Donald Trump. given what they had done to Trump with lawfare, you would have thought that if there was anything incriminating, they would have released it. And then, of course, there were rumors that 80% to 90% of the people mentioned in the files were Democrats. And then there was also an investigation through leaks that Donald Trump ostracized Jeffrey Epstein. And here's the key point: before he was convicted of sexual crime. So there was nothing there. And yet, as soon as Trump comes in, Epstein files, Epstein files, Epstein files. So he releases them. And what does it show? Exactly what everybody knew and what the Democrats themselves knew. Did they say, we're sorry, we cooked this all up, there was nothing in the files? No. They went on right to Obamacare, Affordable Care Act. Let's shut down the government. Republicans will not give us all this money, multi-billion-dollar subsidies. And then people said, well, come on, you guys, you publicize it as the new health care plan. Only 25 million Americans are in it, a small fraction. It doesn't work. You yourself said that they needed subsidies and you were willing to put a time limit on it. And the subsidies ran out and they weren't even enough. It's just constant. This isn't the issue. Yes, it is. Affordable Care Act. That's all that matters. Affordable Care. And then the government was shut down for the longest time in history, 40 days, and now it's open. Has anybody heard anybody talk about the Affordable Care Act? I haven't. And then it was Trump's health. He's got spots on his arms. He has cankles. He's limping. He looks bad. He's losing his mind. Everybody said, wait. You people hid the demonstrable cognitive decline of Joe Biden for 4 years with a very strange White House media conspiracy. Now you're suggesting that Trump is not non-compos mentis, but he just took a health exam, an MRI body scan. No, he's cognitive decline. So and then he releases it. It shows that he's in perfect health for someone his age. Does anybody talk about Trump's health? No. And then it's affordability. That's what it's all about, affordability. Well, wait a minute. During the Biden administration, there was a cumulative inflation of 21%. That averages out to 5.2% per year. When Donald Trump came in January 20th, 2025, it had dipped to 3%, but given all the things that Trump has done, it's still 3%. He has not increased inflation. He has brought in $10 trillion at least of foreign investment. There's going to be enormous stimuli next year as far as oil and gas production at record levels, the big beautiful bills, deregulation, tax cuts. And do we hear about affordability? Not really. I mean, there's no real issue. The inflation rate is lower this year than in any year on average of the Biden administration. And it's going to get better next year. So what am I trying to get at? What's going on? Why do they fixate on these themes and then they just drive it? And the fact is, there are acts of commission and omission. They feel that they can create chaos. They can make people angry. They can bomb Tesla dealerships. They can shut down the government. They can stop ICE. They can tell soldiers to disobey orders. But that's a negative message. What is omitted? That's the committed message. But what is omitted? Do they say, here's my alternate plan for immigration. I want 1 million, 2 million, 3 million illegal. I want to go back to the Biden 2 million illegal aliens a year. I want nothing. Obamacare, here's how we're going to solve it so we don't need subsidies. A, B, C, nothing. Trump's health. Let's have an annual, we introduce legislation that every president has to have an annual physical every year and everything has to be transparent. If that had been true, Biden would have been 25th Amendment the first year of his term. Do they have a crime initiative? Do they have a foreign policy initiative? Do they have any initiative? No. So what they try to do is create chaos. So we'll all lay down in the fetal position, say, please stop it. I don't want it. Or they're going to talk about affordability without ever mentioning it. That under their auspices, the DEI, the ESG, the Green New Deal. It was all regulate, restrict, slow down, and we had 21% inflation. We had low GDP. Do we want to go back to that? So they don't talk about it. So don't pay any attention to Epstein files, Obamacare, Trump's MRI, affordability. These are all just excuses for the absence of 51% on the issues and a lack of a systematic, comprehensive, alternate agenda that they can present to Donald Trump. That all this is absurd does not mean it doesn't work. We have a candidate who in Virginia, running for Attorney General, said that he wanted his opponent dead and his children dead, and he won. He won. We had a candidate for the mayoral race who said he wanted to seize the means of production, and Mondami won. We have all of these races where crazy things happen, but that doesn't mean that we have to accept them as not crazy. They're crazy, and don't pay any attention to them because it's just an excuse for the lack of a serious agenda.